Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of the Nordic Football Podcast. My name is Jonathan Fadugba, and I'm joined, as ever, by the indomitable Steve Wyss. Steve, how are you today?
JF, my man. How are you doing? I'm all right, thank you very much, Jonathan. International break's done and dusted, and back to a really intense period upcoming of club football.
Yeah, you've gone for a bit of an American accent there, I think, to launch the podcast. So I don't know if you've been on holiday or something like that during the international break and picked up a Texas accent, but good to see you on the show as always. We've got a big episode for you. Of course, we've been away for 2 weeks because of the international break. We had results in the internationals, but we don't really cover that much. It's back to club football. That's our bread and butter. And we are going to start in Norway this week. We've got a show. We're going to look at the upcoming European games. We've got some very, very tasty fixes, haven't we? Steve this week in Europe. And we're going to look at the latest goings on in Norway. And then we'll move on to Sweden in part 2. And we'll look at what's happening in Allsvenskan. And you definitely want to listen to what's going on there because it's shaping up very nicely indeed. But we're going to start in Norway. And it's been an interesting week, really, hasn't it, Steve, this week? We've just to recap, we've got 8 games to go now. So this is really, we're getting to the business end of the season now. And there's 1 or 2 teams you may want to focus on this week. But first, we've got on my itinerary here is what's happening in this title race, because it really is turning into a kind of like a traditional classic 2-horse race, really, isn't it? And it's looking like it's going to go maybe potentially to the wire with Bodø Glimt currently top and Molde. What's been the latest?
Do you know what I was thinking actually the other day? It's been probably quite a long time since we've had a genuine, really close title battle in Norway. And there was I think it was maybe 3 or 4 years ago when Brann were actually in the mixer with the Rosenborg. I think there's 4 or 5 games to go, and they had a head-to-head match which Rosenborg won, and that was that. But usually titles, whoever wins the league, is usually quite comfortable and dominant. But this could really get close now because 8 games to go, and Bodø Glimt have a 3-point lead on Molde. They play each other in a midweek round number 24. And that is on the 27th of October. That is effective. I mean, you could call it a title showdown. Who knows what the weekend results will go. They could go into that match level on points. The goal difference is very similar. I think throughout the different stages of the season, it's initially like Bodø Glimt came out firing. They were going to retain the crown easily. Then they slipped up. Molde then had quite a sizable lead. It looked like they were unstoppable. Then they dropped points. Bodø Glimt to come back. And now it looks like both teams are sort of firing again. Really, really close battle. And it's going to... honestly, this one could actually go to the wire.
Yeah, and just, for those who may not have seen the latest goings on, I mean, you've summed it up there quite well. But let's start by looking at the results for anyone who may have missed it as well, just to give a recap. Been a bit of and I've seen you on Twitter, in fact, which we'll talk about in a minute. I've seen you commenting on some of these games over the weekend, as always, not only on at Nordic Football account, but also on your personal account at Meatman Soccer. Commenting on some of these games. It's been a sort of a turbulent week, hasn't it, really? So I'll just read out the results. On Saturday, 16th, we had Lillestrøm 0, Kristiansand 0. We had Molde, as you mentioned there in the title race 3, Tromsø 0, but fairly comfortable win there. Goals for Haugen, Bjørnbakk and Brynildsen. Then on the Sunday, we had Bodø Glimt 2, Sarpsborg 1, a hard-fought victory for Bodø Glimt. Solbakken and Botheim. Then we had Brann 1, Stabæk 1, Haugesund, the Haug 7, Mjøndalen 0, which stunning result, which we'll talk about in a minute. Sandefjord 0, Odd 0, Strømsgodset 0, Viking 1, and then the final game, Rosenborg 2, Vålerenga 2 in the game between the 2 heavyweights. They aren't the 2 teams in the title race, though, as you mentioned. So wins for both sides, Molde and Tromsø. Which of the 2 teams impressed you more this weekend, Steve? Who's looking good? Who's looking better of the 2 going into the last 8 games?
Molde looked very good against Tromsø. I mean, they should have scored 5 or 6 goals. I mean, I was on over 3.5 in this game. I don't know how I lost because Tromsø that should have scored themselves. Molde, I mean, OE missed an open goal at one point, but this was a good matchup for them. The earlier game in the season, they did 3-3. Molde blew a 3-1 lead, but in that game, they created a lot of chances. they really get the system that Tromsø used, 3-5-2, just Molde's getting out wide, and they really dominate that area. And Tromsø can defend well against certain sides, but it's a good matchup for Molde, and they look good. I always had a feeling Bodø Glimt would kind of labour past Sarpsborg, to be honest. I thought it'd be easier than it was. I thought Sarpsborg deserved a point, if I'm being honest. They got a late equaliser, and then they stupidly conceded a penalty. And they certainly, Bodø Glimt were not going to let Patrick Berg go anywhere near the penalty this time after he missed a few in the summer, and Solbakken converted it. Hard-fought win. I said it before, that they've shown really good champions mentality in recent times, Bodø Glimt, which is kind of a worrying sign. They've kind of been winning matches without being at their best at times, which is a great sign, isn't it? So, but yeah, Molde look to have a little bit more momentum at the moment. They haven't got any European matches to play. We're talking about Bodø Glimt Roma soon in upcoming, double header against Jose Mourinho's side. That's got to be a factor in favour of Molde, I think. But Bodø Glimt's really tough mental team at the minute, getting the job done.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And we've got a few listener questions, which we're going to delve into as well during this show. And one of them is a very good question about managers. We'll come on to it later, but I did want to ask you, Steve, Bodø Glimt, we talked about them so much last season. There was so much fanfare, the way they won the league, the points they tallied up, the amount of goals they scored, everything about them. There was a lot of even international coverage, wasn't there? I think even the New York Times wrote about them at one point. What has been the sort of evolution of this team this season with the manager? How good is this manager? Has he kept consistency? Have they, I know you said in previous shows they've lost players and things like that, but just where are this Bodø Glimt side at the moment compared to, maybe last season? What's been the evolution like? And how good is their manager, in your opinion, Ketil Knudsen?
I rate him extremely highly. And
when you say, sorry to interrupt you there, but when you say, when I say how good is he, we're talking someone maybe even like Graham Potter could go to the Premier League maybe eventually one day. Someone who could, if you're looking at where is his sort of maybe ceiling, where's his level, and does he have any ambitions in that sense from your point of view?
His ceiling could be very high. I mean, you never know with a manager's journey, do you? I will follow it with interest. In my opinion, his next move certainly has to be out of Norway. I mean, Ronny Deila went to Celtic that time. I mean, something sort of on a similar line to that, I think, would work well. I certainly don't think it's just a case of, because, sometimes you get a manager at a club like Bodø Glimt and they end up at, say, Rosenborg or maybe like an FC Copenhagen. But I think he can aim higher than that. What he's done, he's basically had 3 or 4 different styles in the last 4 seasons, Jonathan. He got them promoted, and the first season they came up, he did really well in the job of the underdog. Then that season when they just shocked everyone and they finished second in the end, they had this great counter-attacking sort of system that worked brilliantly. And then, obviously, last year, it's got over 100 goals. He developed more of a possession-based system. Whereas this year, he's been focusing on defence more. They've become this really hard-to-break-down side. And it all depends on the personnel. Compared to last season, the squad they had last season was better. The offensive firepower they had was unbelievable. And he used that to his strengths. They could outscore anyone. This year, I think he knows. They've had a few bad injuries as well at times throughout the year in offence. They don't have a Jens Petter Højgaard-like player anymore, a Zinkenegel anymore. So he knew they had to be a little bit more solid defensively. Keep a clean sheet, nick a 1-0, 2-0, 2-1s, and he's clearly he's not just been one system throughout the whole last 3 or 4 years. That's what's impressed me most. He's like he's evolved. And that's a very good sign for me, isn't it? That a manager who can, it's not just him. It's obviously the great coaching staff as well behind there at Bodø Glimt. We've heard they've got a great team up there. It's not just one man. But, I really think he's got great potential. And I think it's about time some decent clubs around Europe started looking at him, to be honest with you. Maybe they already are, because I think he could do a really good job. Anyway, as long as you backed him properly.
Yeah, and you mentioned there sort of a late goal from Solbakken, and it was a penalty, 85th minute, and he buried it quite nicely on his left foot. You've mentioned the evolution of Glimt there in that sense, and just to, I suppose we may as well mention the question now because he did mention Ronny Deila there. The question came on our Nordic Football Podcast Twitter account at Nordic Football. If you don't follow it, then drop us a follow. The question was from Hunkerberry Finn, who asked which Scandinavian manager should take over at Aberdeen. Do you think that sort of moving to Scotland would be a good move for Knutsen potentially, or do you have any other sort of candidates in mind in Norway that you'd want to put forward for Aberdeen or a team in Scotland, Steve?
Yes, thank you for the question, Uncle Briefing. A former guest on the podcast, of course, big Aberdeen fan and Scottish football expert. And I've got to be honest, he might not like me hearing say this, but I think Kjetil Knutsen's too good for Aberdeen. I really do. I think it would be a down, not a good move, not a good career move for him at all. I think if he's going to go to Scotland, it would have to be Rangers or Celtic, and even that might be a case of. Well, no. To be fair, I mean they're two pretty big clubs, aren't they? I mean, I couldn't turn that down. But I tell you what, Aberdeen could do worse than looking in Scandinavia for managers across. Someone mentioned Simo Valakari, who's doing a very good job in Finland again. I've always rated him. You can certainly get a few gems. They could look. How about Christian Christiansen? I mean, he would be a great manager for Aberdeen. They could counterattack things like that. But if they're struggling to find the sort of Scottish guy they want, then Stephen Glass is not even sacked or anything yet. But they could do worse than look to the Scandinavian waters.
My jaw is wide open at the mention of Christiansen, to be honest. I cannot believe you've actually brought him up by name, Steve. Incredible scene. But no, thanks a lot for the question there, Huckleberry Finn. It's a good answer as well, actually. It's quite intriguing. I do agree with you as well. I think there is probably some managers you could find, and Knutsen's done an incredible body of work. Let's move back to the title race, because just looking at some of the raw numbers in terms of the two teams you've mentioned there, Bodø Glimt and Molde. Molde currently expected goals is a lot higher, 50.8 versus 43.84. XG against is Bodø Glimt and Lillestrøm are actually the best two in the league for that. But Bodø Glimt are the best with 21.25 XG against, 20 conceded. So Molde are a little bit more leaky, but obviously expected to score a little bit more as well in terms of the underlying numbers. The manager of Molde, tell us about him and how he's preparing his team for the last 8 games, because it is a battle. Like you said, they've got a bit more of a clearer schedule. How do you forecast their next games? Because there's a big game coming up, isn't there?
Well, Erling Moe, I've always said before, is an underrated manager. He's never really done an awful lot wrong with Molde. He won the league. He got them into the last 16 of the Europa League. I think he's underrated. I think he's got good man management skills. He's proven he can rotate his squad well before. It didn't work as well for him last season, of course, but he was against an absolute monster of a train in Bodø Glimt. They're a more offensive-minded team. They will look to outscore sides. They're happy to. I mean, they won a match 5-4 not too long ago. That's kind of Molde will score more than you. But at the same time, they can defend. If he's proven in Europe, he can get them to defend well. And I think that match is intriguing, because in the previous matchup, he went to Bodø Glimt and he gave him full respect, and he basically parked the bus and defended. He treated it like an away European game. And I don't know whether they'll do the same at home against Bodø Glimt, but it was a strategy that worked, and that Molde counter-attacked. So Moe proved that he has some sort of tactical acumen there, and it'll be intriguing to see how he goes. It's really hard to say. At some point, I've just got to think that Bodø Glimt's European adventures will catch up with them. Like, for example, just before, when they go to Roma on the 4th of November, then just a few days later, they'd go to someone like Haugesund. That just, for me, that's horrible. Even this week, they go home against Roma and then away to Godset. That could be a bit of a banana skin. They're traveling to Zoriel-Luhansk. That's way out there in Ukraine, isn't it? I think somewhere out there in the middle, in the eastern part of Europe. That's before the final round of games. It's just going to have to catch up with them. They don't have the biggest squad, but they might. So far, they've proved me wrong. But I don't know. A lot depends on this match against. If Bodø Glimt win it, they'll give them more of a cushion. If Molde win it, then I think you've got to give Molde the edge for the gold medal. An awful lot does rest on that particular match. Yeah,
and it's going to be a huge game. We may even talk about it. You said it's next Wednesday, isn't it? So we may even talk about it next week's show. But the talk of the town at the moment for the Eliteserien 2020 champions is none other than the big game coming up. And I'm not talking about their game against Sandefjord. I'm talking about their game against AS Roma. It's doing the rounds on the official website. You know, the ticketing information, everything like that. They're saying it's going to be a packed out stadium. It's going to be a packed out arena. I think they're at home, aren't they?
Yeah, home first, and then away in Rome on the 4th of November.
Yeah, it's a double header. So the first game at home. The advice from the official website says get there early. You know, and they've put up a lot of information. Make sure your ticket is ready. Security, that kind of thing. Make sure you're in your right seat. And I'm just going to read you what they said on the website at the end of it, which I quite liked. They say, enjoy the moment. There's 4 bits of advice, and then it ends with, enjoy the moment and create life. We are not spoiled with big games like this in Bodø. Bring your best mood and do not be modest. Shout, scream, clap, and celebrate. Do everything in your power to help the All Yellows to a great achievement in European football. Now, we talked about this just before we came on air, and I put the question to you, and I'm going to put it to you now. I mean, is this the biggest game in Bodø Glimt's history? Because, you know, that's a rousing paragraph just from their club website even. And, you know, the Serie A giants, AS Roma, they've not necessarily had the best of it in years past, but they're still a traditional giant, aren't they, really? How big is this game, Steve? Not just for maybe Glimt as well, but for Scandinavian football.
Well, I guess you live for moments like this, don't you? If you're a supporter up there, you win the league, you get a chance to have a European adventure. And I just think of some of the teams that were in this Europa Conference League they could have drawn. There weren't really that many big dogs yet. Spurs would have been one. Roma would have been another, wouldn't they? So, you know, Jose Mourinho's going to Bodø. I mean, it could snow. It's going to be horrible up there. You know, I don't know what Mourinho's going to make of that. But, you know, this group is, you know, going back to your question, it probably is the biggest game in their history. You know, there's a lot on this. And if they could spring a surprise, then it would be absolutely fantastic for them. And also to try and continue this European adventure. They've got 4 points in the group after 2 games. Roma have won both games so far. We've got Zorya Luhansk on no points and CSKA Sofia on 1 point. I mean, the problem now is I think they're a bit unlucky with the fixture list because, let's be real, they probably will lose both games to Roma. And then Roma are pretty much qualified, so they could put a second string out for the last 2 games where maybe that's when the other teams might get points against Roma. So I think it's going to come down to Glimt. I think they're probably going to have to beat CSKA Sofia at home in the reverse match there. And they probably need to go to Zorya Luhansk and get themselves at least a point. But, you know, in terms of the moments, the magical moments, and these are the ones, aren't they? The atmosphere will be great and everyone's going to be bang up for it.
Yeah, I have to say I did catch some of the Juventus Roma game on Sunday. And I was quite impressed with Roma, actually. I think I thought they were a little bit unlucky. Obviously, had the penalty situations. I thought they looked better than maybe teams in the past. It looks like Mourinho maybe is gearing them up, but obviously they lost the game. I mean, just looking at Jose Mourinho's Instagram, his last post was with him and Conor McGregor, the MMA fighter. I mean, his next post might be with Kjetil Knutsen or Erik Botheim. I mean, what's your prediction for this game, and how, in terms of how can Glimt hurt a team like Roma?
Well, obviously a lot depends on the Roma 11, doesn't it? I mean, I'm sure. I mean, they won both games convincingly so far, 5-1 and 3-0. You know, I don't know. Mourinho tends to take these competitions quite seriously at times, doesn't he? Though, in terms of no matter what 11's out there, they really go for it. It'd be hard for Glimt to resist them. I think last year's Glimt would have given them the scare of their life. I mean, remember Glimt went to AC Milan last year and nearly pushed them all the way to extra time in a one-off game. So I think last year's team would have certainly scared Roma. But this year, I expect Roma to have enough and probably win something like 3-1, maybe, or something like that, 2-0. But you never know, do you, on sort of nights like this? And, you know, I don't know whether the two managers will be meeting up or Mourinho likes a glass of wine, doesn't he? I don't know whether Kjetil Knutsen's into that sort of beverage or not. But no, I hope everyone enjoys it. And it's a great night for Scandinavian football as well, because we don't often get, I mean, Malmo against Chelsea another one this week, isn't it? We don't get enough matches where our teams up there have a big sort of game. So it's good to see.
So you're going for, I mean, it's going to be really, I'm looking forward to this game. I think it's a good reward for Glimt's success as well. I think, as you mentioned, they were a bit unfortunate last season, weren't they, with what happened with Europe and obviously cut the pandemic. You know, they couldn't really enjoy it, could they? So I think this will hopefully be the reward they've been looking for. So you're going for 3-1, is it?
Yeah, I'll go 3-1 Roma, but I hope I'm wrong.
Fantastic stuff. Let's move on then. Mjøndalen, absolutely battered. But you want to start with the Rosenborg game, 2-2.
Yeah, Rosenborg, this was an interesting match, actually. There was a lot of controversy in it in terms of refereeing decisions and things like that. Rosenborg have had a bad couple of games in terms of red cards. They lost against Christiansen 1-0. They had a man sent off after just 20 seconds, Adam Arneson. I think we talked about that before. And, I mean, that's crazy, isn't it? That's a Eliteserien record for red card. They've got another sending off against Vålerenga in the first half. Marcus Henriksen with a double yellow. Now, you can't be... I don't know what's going on there. I mean, it's you could call some of the challenges cynical. They need to start using the head a little bit more because when you go down to 10 men against either of those sort of sides, you're going to restrict the chance of you winning games. But it was a good match. But Rosenborg actually took the lead with 10 men, and then there's an incredible goal. A great equaliser from Odin Thiago Holm, who is definitely a player that he's one to watch out for, to be honest with you. He doesn't get enough minutes for my liking at Vålerenga. He's had injury problems as well. I think I read an article. He's a self-professed Rosenborg fan. So for him, it was kind of a surreal experience to get this equaliser at the Lerkendal Stadion. Fantastic curling strike from distance. I think Vålerenga they've not won there in the league since 2005, Jonathan. That was their best chance to get 3 points in Trondheim. And they kind of went for it late on. They missed a couple of chances and they might regret it. Probably a better point for Rosenborg, actually, but they've got to do something about these red cards.
From your point of view, I mean, Rosenborg's still fourth with 8 games to go. Do you think they'll get into Europe? And we talked a little bit about Vålerenga on the last podcast, didn't we? Not the best of seasons for them. Bit of a victim of their own success in terms of losing players. But tell us a little bit more about Holm.
Well, yeah, he's been more of a bench player at times. It's like the manager brings him on and tries to make an impact. I've not really seen enough of him at times. I think he's a good set. He plays central. He's got good technical ability. He could be one. He could be the next one at Vålerenga who really kicks on. They always have a good conveyor belt there of players of talent, and I think he's the one that this time next year where he might even have left the league. Who knows? But if he can stay fit, then yeah, I think he's the one that's going to make Vålerenga. I'm fine with them this year. They're 7th place. Some might say, it's a bad year for them, but there's been a lot of issues, like we said before. I think they can just kind of write the year off. They're going to finish mid-table, look towards next year. They need to find a way to keep hold of the talent. But because they lost so many this year, probably next year they can keep them a bit longer, if you know what I mean. So, and back to Rosenborg, I mean, it's close. The minute Viking look like the side, they're like a train at the minute. They could be the side that finished 3rd. It's really, I think the bronze medal spot is up for grabs, definitely. And obviously the 4th place side will not get automatically into Europe this year because it's Norwegian Cup will get that, and we're not going to know the winner until April, I don't think. So it's just the top 3 that get Europe.
Yeah, interesting stuff. And it was an end-to-end game, and it was nice to see Stefano Vecchia getting a goal. And by the way, the goal from home is incredible. So if you get a chance to see it, I'll definitely have a look for that. 18-year-old Norwegian. I've actually mentioned him before on a different podcast. I was asked like players who could go on to big things and sort of follow in Haaland's footsteps, and players like that from Norway. And Holm is certainly one that I've heard a lot of big things about. 18 years old, 2003 born. Hell of a shot on him based on the goal he scored this past week. So good to see him getting some more minutes. Let's move on to Mjøndalen because, I mean, that result is the big result of the week. I mean, in terms of scoreline, what has gone on? I mean, Haugesund, we don't talk about much on this podcast, Steve. I always seem to look at them and they're about 8th place. They kind of, to me, feel like the old Kalmar, where it was a team like that, where, you always knew they were going to be maybe a Örebro type thing. They're always just going to be solidly, unspectacular. But what has gone on here?
I mean, I think for the first time, there's some questions being asked about Vegard Hansen's position as Mjøndalen manager. He's been the manager there for 16 years now as head coach, which is a hell of a run, isn't it? But there's the media starting to question him, whether he's the man now. A lot saying that, it's been a great run, a great innings, but perhaps time to move on at the end of the season. And then some are saying, well, if he's going to leave at the end of the season, he might as well maybe bring someone in now to try and change things around. The problem is they're effectively a semi-pro club. The resources are not that great at all. They're on a shoestring budget. You can't expect miracles when you're like that. This is the top division in Norway. I mean, the thing is, he has so much credit in the bank after 16 years. I mean, have you ever seen the Bond film Goldfinger? Or the gold that's in Fort Knox or there? That's how much credit he's got built up in the bank. He's been that much of a legend at the club. You don't sack someone like this. He actually came out and did an interview after the game, after losing 7-0. He came out and faced the media, fair play. He said it's not good enough, but we're going to keep fighting. And he's devoted to the project, he said. So, the sports manager has said we're right behind Vegard Hansen still. He deserves, after the career he's had here, he deserves all our full respect. But they lost 6-7-0. This is one of those. They weren't as bad as the scoreline suggested, actually. Haugesund just took a lot of their chances. Haugesund are a weird team. They can blow very hot and cold. I must say, I'm starting to think, what could they do to change things? It's not as simple as change a manager. But it does look like to me, they've only won 2 games all year. They look like they're going to be one of the teams that go automatically relegated.
Yeah, hat-trick for Undor. And looks like Mjøndalen might well be seeing Undor themselves at the end of the season. So, funnily enough, you've mentioned Valakari. We've also had Vegard Hansen on the podcast, haven't we? So you can dip into the archives as well as Huckleberry Finn. Just looking at the sort of stats for this game, I mean, it wasn't even that much of it wasn't like total domination, was it? I mean, they had 23 shots for Haugesund, but Mjøndalen had 9 themselves and created 8 chances. Mjøndalen created 19 chances according to these stats in front of me. But it just seemed like maybe everything went in for Haugesund. I mean, the XG was only 1.93 according to this, versus 0.78, but a 7-0 victory. How would you summarize? I mean, there's 7 points off getting out of jail, 4 points off kind of getting into the relegation playoffs. At this point, with 8 games to go, 24 points available. How would you sort of summarize their time? Because obviously we haven't checked in with Vegard for a few years. Might be times to might have to get him on the show one last time before he maybe leaves. But I remember that interview really fondly. It was a very good interview. Is it just a case of its club doesn't have the resources to really stay up? Has it been poor recruitment? Maybe has it been bad decisions? Is it tactics? What's been the cause of this gradual slide?
It's funny, you're right. You look at the stats of that game. Say Mjøndalen had lost that match 1-0 or 2-0. No one's talking about this game at all. I mean, I watched a game in France at the weekend. Toulouse beat Auxerre 6-0. And it's fine because Auxerre are going well in the league. They've got a manager, John McFarlane, who's known for doing stuff. No one's really questioning it. It's just a one bad day at the office. But because Mjøndalen have had such a bad year, 2 wins, they're rock bottom. Suddenly, when you lose 7-0, it's like everyone's looking at it and thinking, what's going on here? Something got to change. And the simple fact is they're just not good enough, Jonathan. They've not had injuries. They've not had suspensions. The squad's got quite a lot of depth to it. They just don't have enough quality. It's as simple as that. And sometimes, everyone's asking questions and looking for answers when a team's not doing very well. It just sometimes is a case of they do not have good enough players compared to the rest of the league. And in the previous 2 campaigns, he'd probably got the absolute most out of that squad he could, and he had sort of a couple of miracle survivals. This year, perhaps he hasn't quite got as much out of it as he would want, and they haven't had the bit of luck on their side. The mad thing is they're only 4 points off the playoff spot, so the miracle could still be on, but I just don't know where they're going to get the next 3 points from. They've got Tromsø next. I mean, that's already a must win. I worry. I think they're going down, but I say the crazy thing is if other teams start to lose again, and just a couple of wins, you're back in the fight, aren't you? It's a funny game, football.
The thing is, when the recruitment goes wrong like this, you've mentioned they maybe don't have the result. Is it because they've made wrong choices, or is it because they don't have the budget? Because Bodø Glimt have shown you don't need a huge budget to be successful And there's others around the world. So sometimes I think, is that a fair excuse, or has it been poor recruitment? Where do you stand on that?
But when you're a club but you're fully professional, then you need you're not going to be able to attract a certain caliber of players, aren't you? They have, I think. I mean, I'll give you an example. Right at the start of the season, they had a guy on loan from Viking, Sebastian Sebulosen. He did so well there, and they trained him up so well. Obviously, the coaching was good. That Viking pulled him back after just 5 or 6 games. So I think it's just a case of they can't. Yeah, I don't think they can attract a certain caliber of player. The resources are not there, and they struggle to even come to an agreement with the captain Christian Gauseth at the start of the season. Funds are obviously very limited. His hands are tied. I would like to see Hansen have a go at a club where the resources are more. I wonder what he could do. I rate him as a manager, actually. But the club itself needs to somehow find a way to, if they ever really want to progress, they need to pump some more budget into the club, because they're going to continue to be this yo-yo side else. I'm sure if they went down, they'd probably have a good chance of coming straight back within the next couple of years. The next time they do come back, maybe they need to think about, if possible, then a bit more investment.
Mjøndalen to the max there, so that's a very interesting discussion. Tromsø, Brann and Stabæk have all been picking up points, so we'll kind of maybe rush through them, but there's been some quite big news at Sarpsborg. I'd be interested to get your views on this. Steve, do you want to fill us in on what's going on there? They're currently 12th in the table. This weekend just gone, they've had a sort of they've had that defeat, didn't they? But there's been some big news.
Yeah, Lars Bohinen will be leaving the club at the end of the season. He came in and replaced Mikael Stara, who moved to IFK Göteborg after just, I think, 3 or 4 games this term. And Bohinen's come in and he's done okay. In fact, some might say he's done a poor job at times. They're only 4 points clear of the playoff spot at the moment and 5 from automatic relegation. For me, this is a bit of a strange one to announce it now, because they're in a position, obviously there's still a lot going on. What are the players thinking? They're going to be a new manager next year. And this can create a strange dynamic sometimes, in my opinion. If they were already mid-table, say they were in Horgensen's position or Strømsgodset's position, and I would have no problems with this announcement. But they're not safe yet, and they've lost a lot of games. They've lost the last 7 away games, Jonathan. And if the likes of Brann and Tromsø and Stabæk keep picking up points here and there, they could get sucked into trouble if they're not careful. And Bohinen doesn't have a great track record in the Eliteserien, let's be honest. I want to like Lars Bohinen as a manager, but he doesn't have a great track record at this level. He had 1 good year with Sandefjord, even that tailed off. And look, if they're going to replace it, I would almost be tempted to say, right, we're going to get rid of you now and bring someone new in for the rest of the season. They obviously have got confidence that he will keep them up and everything like that. And I know he keeps the system they want, but it's a bit of a strange one, if you ask me.
Yeah, and do you think they'll go down?
You know what? I've got a gut feeling that one of Sandefjord or Sarpsborg will get sucked into trouble down there, because the way Brann are playing at the minute, I think Brann will. They've got some tough fixtures, but I think they're gonna. I don't see Brann as automatic relegation. Tromsø, I've seen enough from them as well, and I think they'll pick up points at home. Stabæk, if I've gun to my head, I think Stabæk will be automatic relegation, but Erik Schoner has got them playing better football as well. It's not beyond reason they could get points. There's always someone that sort of gets sucked into trouble out of nowhere. I always remember back in the day in the Premier League, Wimbledon, they lose like the last 8 games to go down. Things like that. If Sarpsborg start to get, on a downward spiral, and they're not that many points clear, or Sandefjord are a bit further up, but I've got a good feeling they could get in trouble, Sarpsborg, if they're not careful. I don't think they will, but
interesting.
It's a dangerous thing. It's a dangerous game to play, and I'm not sure I like this announcement, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the table, they're only 4 points above the drop zone, Salzburg. So when, I remember when Ferguson was announced to be leaving, and then he changed his mind in the end many years ago now at Manchester United, and it did cause a dip in results, didn't it? I mean, 4 points is not much to make up. So, might give a little bit of hope to the likes of Brann, Stabæk, and maybe even Mjøndalen, who knows? Let's move on to 2 final bits of news. Number one, I mean, I know you wanted to, we can't really leave this episode without talking about Christensen, who are third, my boys. But you did mention there's, the 0-0s and strange lack of goals this round. And then there was one other piece of news you wanted to pick up on.
Well, I don't know what. It was a strange round. I've never seen so many big chances missed, Jonathan, this round in Norway. It was like every single game. I was betting on quite a lot of overs this round, and I was very frustrated that just the basics of football finishing. It seemed the goalkeepers had an amazing round as well. Wherever you look, like some keepers had. I mean, there was one massive cock-up for Lennart Grill for Brand, but it seemed in general there was a lot of good saves going on, which is not that normal for Eliteserien. There was 2 0-0s. There's hardly been any 0-0 since June. So for 2 to pop up in the same round is very strange. There was quite a few under 2.5 games as well, or under the goal line. And then you had the random 7-0 with Augustsund. There's a lot of big chances missed. I don't know whether can you explain that? Is it maybe 2 weeks off? The team's is it getting a bit colder up in Norway now? Maybe players just not fancying it as much. It was a strange round, really. That there was. It wasn't that the matches were not. The chances were there. It's just they weren't being taken.
Yeah, from a betting point of view, I saw your Twitter account, and you were very frustrated at some of these games. Christensen, I mean, you did call that game potentially. I think you said that they were underpriced maybe in that match. They've managed to keep on to their top 3 spot, 39 points, creditable draw. Lillestrøm currently sixth in the table, so they're doing okay. You predicted they'd have a good season, and at the moment, it looks like you're bang on to rights there. So good shout on that one. I think in the next couple of weeks, we probably should look at the Norwegian Eliteserien Fantasy League, because that's something we haven't really touched on too much this season. I mean, I've got my captain Pellegrino at this moment in time, and I think we do want to talk to you about that before the season closes out for sure. And in the run, in the way to before the run-in kicks in, it'd be nice to sort of have a little final analysis of that. But there's one last piece of news, and that's about potential rule change in Eliteserien coming. Yeah,
it looks like VAR will come into the Eliteserien in year 2023. There was a meeting. There was a meeting recently, and it's in the majority of the top clubs are in favour of it. There was not much opposition for VAR in Norway. Referees have been for it. I think it's just because football is going to become, VAR is going to become so universal across the world. If you don't have it, you're going to be falling behind like the Stone Ages almost, aren't you? I mean, VAR, like it or not, is here to stay. And there's, my opinion of it has certainly changed since it came in. I think things are a little bit better now with it, but it looks like in the year 2023, I don't know why next year it couldn't be implemented. I guess these things take time to be voted in and things and stuff like that. But obviously that would be big for the league. I mean, the referee, we're like everywhere, there's mistakes with decisions and stuff. So I guess they just want to bring it in and make it universal.
In a word, in your opinion, to cap off part 1 of this show, will VAR improve Eliteserien in your mind in terms of the quality of the product, if you know what I mean?
No, I think it'll make it worse. No, I'm not looking forward to it coming in Norway, to be honest. I think certain leagues don't need it as much as others. This is an example of where they don't need VAR to improve the product of the game, in my opinion.
Yeah, there's a debate in Sweden as well about it. So good to get your thoughts there. That wraps it up for part 1. We'll be back in part 2. We'll head over to Sweden. We've got a big game coming up as well on that side of the fence in Europe as well. And we'll recap what's going on in the league in general. So tune in after this short break for part 2.
Welcome back to the Nordic Football Podcast. I'm Steve Wyss, and I'm with Jonathan Fadugba. And now we're going to talk about the Swedish section, the Allsvenskan specifically. And before we go, how's the fantasy going for you in Allsvenskan at the moment, Jonathan? I've actually moved up to provisional 57th place. I had a guy from Häcken in my team, Patrick Vollemark, 17 points he got. I wish I had put him as captain. But a few decent point pickups, and I'm moving upwards.
Yes, very, very loaded. I like your loaded question there. Very, very nice indeed. I think you know full well how I'm getting on. I'm behind you in the table. If that's what you wanted to hear, then there it is. It's paining me a lot, but listen. In the famous words of Kevin Keegan, we're still fighting for this title, and I will love it if we beat you, Steve. Love it. So let's see what happens. But yeah, I'm not having the best of times really. I've still got all my chips to play, so who knows? But my defense has been letting me down, and that probably leads us on to what we're going to talk about, because I've got 2 Djurgården defenders and 1 AIK defender, and they did not do much for me at all this week.
Yes, shout out to Philip Christiansen, who continues to be top of our Nordic Football Podcast League, and Norwich with the Rat Pack in second place, and Marcus Nielsen with FC Bonk in third spot. So yeah, there's still quite a few more rounds to go in the Allsvenskan, and look, things have got. I mean, we talked about an exciting title race in Norway. It's just got a bit batshit mental again, hasn't it, in Sweden? Because there's a lot of teams in the top there have been dropping points. But is it fair to say there's a 4-way title battle now ongoing?
Well, yeah, we can certainly talk about the potential 4-way title. It is heating up, like you said, Steve. It's coming to squeaky bum time, in the words of the great man Sir Alex Ferguson. And before you do go on, I just wanted to mention in the Eliteserien fantasy, because we haven't talked about that much. Just give a shout out to Emil Magnus Jacobsen if he's listening, of Juveline United. He's top of our Nordic Football Podcast Eliteserien League, and FPL Heskebo is in second, but Juveline United have a hell of a lead, by the way. It's more than 50 points. Well, roughly 50, I think 49 points. So well done to Emil Magnus there, and FPL Heskebo and FF Ramblings are trying to catch him up in second and third. But yeah, big week in Allsvenskan actually, this Steve.
Yeah.
What can I say? I mean, I guess we'll start with this as the title. This is the table as we wrap up this most recent round. We have had 23 games played, so we're 1 ahead of you. We've got 7 games to go, and it's currently Djurgården, AIK, and Malmo completely level on points, 44 points each. Malmo top with plus 23 goal difference. Djurgården second plus 16. AIK third plus 13. And then just behind them, coming up from the bumpers behind them, is Elfsborg plus 13 goal difference, 42 points, 2 points behind them. So, you know, we talked about, I think on the last show, saying it was probably a 3-horse race. Elfsborg had a couple of, ropey results. They lost 3 games in a row, and it looked maybe, they got absolutely destroyed by Mjällby, and you kind of thought, okay, it's title race over for them. But no, they're back in it now. Two wins in October now between the international break, before and after, and a massive win 3-0 away at Djurgården has taken them back into this race, and really it's been a massive blow to Djurgården as well, of course, because they were top. So probably start with Malmo. They had a comfortable kind of win against Östersund. Comfortable in terms of the scoreline, 3-0. Not necessarily comfortable in the game itself. They weren't incredible. Started with a kind of a 3-5-2 formation. Soren Reeks was back after a month out. They had to make a couple of changes as well. Arma Hodzic was injured. Erik Larsson had to come in. But they were a little bit sluggish for the first bit, and they weren't great, but they did eventually, have too much for Östersund, who really, it's probably game over for them now, isn't it? You talked about Mjøndalen. It's looking like it's probably goodbye. Well, it nearly is goodbye, really, for Östersund's rock bottom of the table. And yeah, but Malmo, in terms of their title race, they got a result that they needed. It was in the end fairly comfortable. Erdal Rakip had a very good game, by the way, in that one. And then obviously the next game in terms of the title race was the big derby, and Hammarby managed to win the Stockholm derby against AIK 1-0. It was an Akin Kumiyamu goal, and it was another sort of typical Stockholm derby. It was played under a plume of smoke for parts of it. There was some magnificent tifos as usual, but I'm a little bit surprised Hammarby pulled this one out of the bag, I have to say. AIK have been in great form, and confidence looked to be with them, but yeah, this is a blow for them, of course. And at the moment, Steve, really, no one's just capitalizing on this title race. I mean, who wants it is a question I'm asking myself.
Hammarby have the second best home record in the league. 8 wins, 3 draws, and just 1 defeat, which is to Elfsborg. I remember the last season they had fans. They were very, very good at home as well. It's not an easy place to go, that is it. And but AIK, they've got to think that it's a good chance. I mean, Djurgården have lost their last 2 games now. Even Malmo lost at home to Mjällby not too long ago. And it's a question of who wants it. Elfsborg, we thought they were gone. And now they're sneaking back in the race again. I looked at their fixtures, and it doesn't look a bad set of fixtures. The titles are not won on paper, but I'd rather be facing the likes of Örebro and Degerfors than I would some of the top 5 or 6. So I can't believe this. It brings back memories. I mean, we've had some really close title showdowns, haven't we, since we started this podcast in Sweden, and I just sense it's going to go that way again. It feels like a sort of a last day showdown unless one team can pull away. And I'm not even going to bother asking you who you think is going to win it. I seem to ask you this every week, and it's just a question. Let's just enjoy the title race as it is, and see how it goes. Really, Jonathan.
Well, I mean, if you like tight title races, then get yourself to Sweden, because it's going to be magnificent. I think. I mean, it's going to be really. I don't see a clear. I mean, you asked me on the last podcast, and I said Malmo, and that was when they were 3rd. And I'm going to stick with it. I think they will eventually emerge. But the thing is, as you mentioned with Glimt, they've still got Europe. So, big games coming up now against Chelsea back to back, and how's that going to affect their form?
Yeah,
they've got. I'm just going to read the fixtures. Obviously, next they've got Varberg away, and then they got AIK at home. So that they've got to play. Yeah. That could end up being the biggest game of the season potentially. And then, I know it's they don't have the hardest of runs, to be honest, on paper, Malmo, but one game that might be a bit of a potential banana skin is EFK away, because they have a big rivalry, EFK and Malmo. I know EFK have had their troubles, but that's one of those sort of classic games, if you know what I mean. It's almost like Man United Liverpool in some ways, in terms of just like that giant club type rivalry, if you know what I mean. They still hate each other, AFK. So that's maybe one banana skin. They've got to play Häcken. They've got to go to Kalmar, who've been in great form. But their running isn't too difficult if they can get past the AIK. So I still think Malmo are favourites, if you're asking me that.
Yeah, I sense that if they weren't in Europe now and they could focus entirely on the league, they would probably, not saying run away with it, they'd probably gain themselves enough of an advantage. But back to back against Chelsea, it's going to take it out of them, isn't it? I just think it is. It's difficult. They've already dropped some points on the back of European matches, the Mjällby result. But nothing's certain here. If Elfsborg had beaten Östersund 5 games ago, as they should have done, they'd be top of the league right now. But it's that match that Djurgården and Elfsborg, I expected Djurgården to win it. That's the sort of match they usually win in the last 2 or 3 years. To lose it 3-0 at home, I mean, that's just a strange one to me. What does that tell you about Djurgården's mentality right now? Are they obviously, there's all this sort of mental baggage of losing derby matches. It finally kind of caught up with them.
I think the short answer that Steve is I'm just, it's really difficult because they could go very close and then you look a bit silly, but I'm just not quite sure that they're good enough to win the league. This squad. I think losing Witry has been a bit of a blow to the balance of their defense. He was such a good player for them in both boxes. Really, he can get down the field. He was a fantasy legend, really, wasn't he? Anyone who had him in their fantasy team, kind of, he was doing so well. And I always think the mark of a title-winning side, Steve, I don't think with 7 games to go, you're losing 3-0 at home.
No.
If you think about title winners, just traditionally they tend to build steam, and I'm not convinced they got what it takes to win the league. I just think in certain games they're going to fall short. They are very good. The joint managers there have done very well. Don't get me wrong, but my gut feeling just is they're not going to quite maybe make it. You got to give your hats off to Elfsborg though. I mean, their counter-attacking game, by the way. You could argue they're the best counter-attacking team in Allsvenskan, the way they hit teams on the break. Rasmus Alm had a really, really good game, 2 goals, both from sort of counter-attacks. They they do look. I mean, whisper it, but they do look like potential outsiders. And they do look like a dark horse. They've got a decent defense. You know, they're not bad defensively. They like to counter. The game style is kind of quite good. Their recruitment's been good over the last sort of, you know, maybe 1 to 2 seasons. The 2 games that they lost back to back, the 3 games they lost in a row really just was a bit of a knock. Otherwise, they'd be top of the league. You know, and even if they just got 1 win in those games, they'd be well in it. And so I just wondered, do they have the propensity to maybe then go on another bad run of sort of 2 or 3 defeats? I just think when the pressure's on, will they be able to hold it off? But you've got to take your hat off to Elfsborg, because, you know, they did so well last season. You know, I didn't think they would do much. They had a fantastic year, and to do it all over again now is really impressive. You just look at their run in. They've got to go to Norrköping. They've got to go to Örebro as well. So even they've got a fairly easy run. The sort of biggest quote unquote game is second last game of the season against AIK in November, end of November. So that could, you know, almost be a potential title decider at that point. So Elfsborg are definitely in this title race. I think, you know, they're not out of it, but it's just the question for me is, do they have the consistency to carry on this last 7 games?
Obviously, we talked about Malmo being in the Champions League. They've got this double header coming up against Chelsea now, so I think we should just maybe talk about it a little bit. I mean, in terms of, I mean, we talked about Bodø, Glimt, Roma. I mean, Malmo and Chelsea have faced each other just a couple of years ago, of course, in Europe. So I guess there's not quite so much of a novelty, but this is Champions League group stage now. You know, they've struggled. They've had a bad start in the group, but there's still a kind of a carnival party atmosphere for Malmo in the Champions League. They're in the competition. They have a chance to face a team like Chelsea in Europe.
Yeah, I think there is there's this kind of realization that, you know, the first 2 games have not gone well for them, have they really? I mean, you need, if you're going to do anything in the Champions League, you need a good start, and they've just not had a good start. It's as simple as that. So it's kind of got to a point now with 2 defeats, you know, in terms of the group stage. It's looking like see what happens, really. You know, they're going to go to Stamford Bridge this week. I was there the last time they went to Stamford Bridge that was 3 or 4 years ago now. I remember we did a live Periscope outside the stadium. Any long-time listeners who might remember that, drop us a tweet at Nordic Footpod. We'll definitely give you a retweet, because I'd love to know if anyone followed us around then. Is long-term listener. But yeah, if you look at the group itself, you know, they're bottom of the table. They've got 0 points from 2 games. Juve are top, Chelsea are second. You can't see it. You can't see them not getting. They're not going to get anywhere near those 2, really, realistically, are they? Especially with back-to-back against Chelsea, European champions. I think this is a sort of game where they're going to maybe approach it from a defensive point of view. I think they'll play a very low block and just try and maybe hit them on the break and see what can happen. It's probably a good thing for Malmo that Korlak was on the score sheet at the weekend. Christensen scored a nice goal as well. Adi Nalic scored a decent goal. But this is not Ostersund's, is it? This is Chelsea. So it's a huge gap in quality. I think it's for their fans to probably just get down there and enjoy it. I wonder if Pontus Jansson will be there, because he's the famous former Leeds man, and you know, he's a big Malmo fan, isn't he? I'm sure he'll be in West London as he was last time. So I think it's for the Malmo fans to just enjoy that trip, and then maybe in the home, if they get, I don't think they'll get anything from this game, but maybe in the second game, you know, at home against Chelsea, maybe they can look to sort of spring an unlikely result, an upset. But you know, even then, if they get a point, they'd probably be happy with that. But it's not going to get them through, is it? So
there's good prize money at stake, though, isn't there?
Yeah, there's prize money if they can get it, but I think, if I'm being totally honest, I think they're going to finish bottom of this group, and they're probably getting to the point now where it's try and enjoy it while it lasts type thing. But football always surprises you, Steve. You just never know.
Yeah, also about kind of regaining a bit of respectability, I think. And I talk about prize money. They've already kind of won the lottery, haven't they, by getting the 10 million, is it, to make the group stages? So it's you know, anything else is just a bonus, isn't it? But you know, interesting couple of matches coming up for Malmo there against Chelsea. Just there was a question actually that we got asked by on Twitter, Bottas at Bothak ASC. Who do you think are going to be the 3 key players going into the last rounds of the Allsvenskan? Maybe Johan Dahlin, Adig Benro, or even Rasmus Elm. Interesting mix of players there. What are your thoughts on that question?
Well, it's a really good question, and it's quite hard to sort of just pick 3 players because, ultimately teams win titles. I know it's a bit of a corny thing to say, but I don't think there's a sort of if I was being totally honest, I don't think there's like a clear best player in the league type thing where it's like if they're good, that this team will win the league. If they're not, I don't think we're in the days of kind of if you look at the Malmo team, for example, the one at last season, I suppose if you looked at the setup of their team, they had 1 or 2 players where it was like if they don't perform, no one performs. I think they're a little bit more rounded. I wouldn't say completely, but Keisa Tellin, for example, last season was so important to them, and that kind of thing. Kolak, if he's on it, he can definitely fire them to the title. But they've still got other options if he's not on it, to be honest. So you're asking me to pick 3. I mean, Adek Benro is mentioned there. I mean, he's had an incredible season, by the way. Just got to give him a shout out because he's done so well. But Norrköping, I mean, absolutely battered this evening against Häcken 5-0. I turned it off at 0-0 and came back and it was 5-0, so I couldn't believe it. He's had an incredible season. I find it really hard to name key players, to be honest, Steve. I'm almost struggling to answer the question.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's very difficult. Put you on the spot there. And you mentioned that result. There were some strange results this round. I'm just going to go through them, actually. Djurgården 0, Elfsborg 3. Häcken 5, Norrköping 0. Hammarby 1, AIK 0. IFK Göteborg 2, Örebro 0. Mjällby 4, Kalmar 0. Degerfors 2, Halmstad 1. Östersund 0, Malmö 3, and Sirius 2, Varberg 1. I mean, Häcken 5-0 against Norrköping, that's a crazy... If Norrköping had won that, they'd be in the title race. They would only be 2 points behind the top 3. Imagine Norling coming in to steal the title. That would have been crazy. But Mjällby 4, Kalmar 0. Now, Kalmar we've been raving about them all year on this pod, haven't we? They've been this brilliant possession team, everything like that. They're up there in 7th place on 37 points. They've had a fantastic year. They go and lose 4-0 to Mjällby. And Mjällby beat Elfsborg 4-0 as well. They haven't conceded a goal in God knows how long. What is going on down there at Mjällby? Because I thought Kalmar would go there and probably maybe win the game 1-0 or it'd be a 0-0. But 4-0.
It's an unbelievable story, really. It's something we talked about a little bit about when they, were on the last show, when they beat Malmo away, obviously. They've not conceded a goal, Steve, since the 23rd of August. Now, for a small team like Mjällby, that is unbelievable. And it's not even like they've had a decent run where you could say, well, they've had easy games. I mean, I'm just going to read you the run of games where they have not conceded. Djurgården away, 0-0. Degerfors away, where they won 2-0. AIK at home, 0-0. Häcken away, 0-0. I mean, they've just battered Norrköping 5-0. So, I mean, that's an achievement in itself. Halmstad 0-0. I mean, that was Halmstad, everyone probably, that's fair enough. Elfsborg, they beat 4-0. I mean, I don't know how they've done that. Then they've gone to Malmo, won 1-0. And now they've battered Kalmar 4-0. I mean, it's an incredible story, especially when you consider, Steve, that before that, they'd lost 5 in a row, not long before that. I mean, the run leading up to the beginning of August, they lost five straight. They've changed the manager. They've changed the style a bit. But this is a real unbelievable story, to be honest. It's one that we have talked about this. We've been talking behind the scenes about potential team analysis that we're plotting, aren't we, Steve? So I don't want to go too much into it, spoil it for people, but we are bubbling something maybe behind the scenes for a future episode. But yeah, of course, you have to mention it because battering Kalmar like that is really surprising. Kalmar have had such a great season. They're now down to 7th after that defeat. Before that, they were kind of like looking at top 5 potentially. Mjällby, this run of form now has taken them, really got them out of relegation problems, really. I mean, they looked like they were, at one point, they looked like they were toast. It looked like they were definitely going to be one of the bottom 3. They're now 4 points clear of the relegation zone. They're above EFK in the league. With 7 games to go, things can turn. I mean, when are they going to concede next? At this point, they're scratching your head. But the next game, they've got EFK, which is a massive game because I think if they win that, they could almost say they're safe. Then they got Norrköping away, Hammarby at home, Sirius, Östersund, Örebro, Varberg. So Mjällby looking like the change in manager has probably saved their season.
Yeah, and they finished strong last season as well, if I remember correctly. And I saw the goals for this game, and Kalmar just looked like they were sleepwalking for the first 15 minutes. They were very bad goals to concede. Maybe they just weren't at it, but a hell of a performance from Mjällby. You're right. We are looking at doing some teams in focus with tactical analysis, and they would definitely be a contender for your team. If anyone wants me to do a particular analysis on a team in Norway, do let me know, and I will consider them. So, but yeah, I mean, just looking at some of the results. Now we're going to move to the relegation battle now, and there was one match that did catch my eye, and that was the IFK Gothenburg game against Örebro. 2-0 win for IFK, and the XG for Örebro in this game was horrific. It was 0.1 XG for Örebro. This is a match that it's almost last chance saloon. They were 6 points behind IFK going into this game. If they won it, they're back in the race for the playoff spot. And they've turned up and they've played terrible by the looks of it. And IFK have deserved to win. Look at the fans were going crazy in this game. And I suddenly realised there's no way a club as big as IFK could ever really get relegated, to be honest with you. The support they've got is mental. They've got this goal song afterwards, which is a weird old folk dance thing. And the place was buzzing. But for Örebro, very disappointing, and I believe there's a change of manager there now.
Yeah, Örebro it was a huge game, and I know you asked me in the last show about EFK, and you said, "Do I think they'll go down?" And I basically said it. I always just think that there's always going to be three worse teams. I said it last show. I think there'll always be three. There'll always be three worse teams in the EFK Göteborg in this league, just based on history, based on playing squads, based on fans. This is a massive team we're talking about here, and whenever they've got real problems, they just about can get away with it. They are dysfunctional. I mean, it's been addressed in the media this week. There's been question marks, rumors of dressing room splits, rumors that certain players don't get on with each other behind the scenes. So there's still turmoil there. They're definitely not out of it, but I think what we saw this past weekend is that Örebro are in serious trouble. We talked about that. They rolled the dice already with one manager, and changed halfway through the season. They've now had to roll the dice again with a new manager. So it's kind of looking like they are, they're running out of ideas, really, isn't it? It's like you've got 3 bullets in the chamber, and they're down to the last bullet. They pulled the trigger. Victor Gasimba was sacked during the international break, and Marcus Lantz has come in. Marcus Lantz, of course, was formerly at Mjällby, and he did a really good job, actually. I thought he was a decent manager there. So nothing's paid off now. The idea was that it kind of have an immediate impact because they're running out of games, but it didn't quite happen for them. EFK did enough to get results, and let's face it, Steve, Örebro are running out of time. They've been in this league for many a year. Since we've been doing this podcast, they haven't been down since we've done this, but they are starting to run out of time. And just in terms of Lantz, he will have a chance because his points per game was decent when he was at Mjällby in that season. I was really surprised he didn't get another job. He got 1.69 points per match as Mjällby manager in that 2020 season, and he kind of decided I think he had a mutual decision with the club when he left Mjällby, just saying that, listen, it's not working out for me, I'm out of it. And I thought he was going to go on to bigger things because they finished 5th in the league. Don't forget last season, Steve. So I was convinced that he was going to find a bigger job, really. So I'm a little bit surprised that he didn't get a job sooner than this, with other sackings that have happened. And I'm a little bit surprised to see him at Örebro. I have to say, I think he could have maybe got a bigger job, but he's going to have a real test of his managerial skills here, because if he can pull this one out, just looking at the table, Örebro are now 7 points behind the relegation playoff, let alone getting out of trouble. They're now 9 points away from safety. So with 7 games to go, 21 points available, it's looking like the 2 O's it's looking like Cheerios. It's looking like Cheerio to the both of them. So Örebro and Östersund looks like they're both out of here.
Gone. Yeah, I think I'll give him the benefit of the doubt for that first game, because that's a tough place. When that crowd gets behind IFK, that's a tough place to go. You mentioned Malmo have got to go there, I think, in a few rounds' time. That's a real banana skin, isn't it? that crowd bay for blood and stuff. And, that was never going to be an easy game for Örebro. But one thing I will say, if Halmstad is really struggling to win games at the minute, that playoff spot, more often than not, the Allsvenskan side wins the playoff, doesn't it? Not many times do we see the relegation from that spot. So if you can get into 14th, I'm not saying guaranteed survival, but you've got a bloody good chance of it, in my opinion. So
go on, sir.
Yeah, it's all about trying to get that playoff spot, I think, and the 7 off it. They've got to get a couple of wins soon, but it's not completely dead in the water because Halmstad are looking like they're not getting a win from anywhere at the minute.
Yeah, I mean it's doable, but they've got the next 2 games are absolute must wins, in my opinion. They've got Degerfors at home, and then the midweek round next midweek they've got Halmstad away.
Oh, that's massive. For
me, they need 4 points minimum, in my opinion. They cannot lose to those. They cannot lose to Halmstad, in my opinion, as well. Because after that, they've got Djurgården at home, Hammarby away, Kalmar at home, Mjällby away, Elfsborg at home. Now, by December 4th, last game of the season, Elfsborg could be going for the title. So, they've got a huge last 5 games in terms of difficulty. So for me, the next 2 games will decide their fate. Sometimes you do get those fairy tale stories, don't you, Steve, with a team low down the table who pulls off a fairy tale, starts beating teams left, right, and centre. I mean, just looking at it from an English point of view, I remember one year Sunderland escaped. I think I remember them going to Chelsea and winning and things like that. You just suddenly get these crazy results. But, Marcus Lanz's going to have to work some serious magic for that to happen. So I really think this next 10 days is going to decide I think it's going to decide Örebro's season. And just on, you mentioned the EF Core there and the crowd. I've been to an EF Core Malmö game, by the way, and it was an incredible atmosphere. It was one of the best experiences I think I've probably ever had in watching football. I remember it was first day of the season, and I can tell you the fans will bring a serious atmosphere to that game. They do not like each other, and sort of putting one on Malmö to stop them winning the title would almost make up for this terrible season that they've had. So I'm not saying they're going to do it on the pitch, but Malmö will have a game there, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, if that was the atmosphere for Örebro at home, I can imagine what it's like for. I kind of forgot in a way how big IFK are, with all the COVID and no fans and stuff, and that is a club that I could like that sort of atmosphere and passion. I definitely could.
Well, I've told you so many times about Gothenburg, how great it was, and why you always ask me why I enjoyed it. I mean, when you got that on your doorstep, it is an appealing. It's very appealing. I mean, they are a massive club. I'm quite fond of that. And when, like you said, when they create an atmosphere, they create an atmosphere, and so do away fans as well when they go there because they're such a big team.
Definitely, they won't go down because even if they got into the playoff, you ain't beating that in the playoff. Sorry, it's not going to happen. So I think that's pretty much it for this episode, Jonathan.
Yeah, you know what I wanted to do? I just wanted to come back to your man's question there. Was at both us?
Yes.
I'm gonna base my answer on on our friends at Wyscout. So I just wanted to read because the reason it's tough to answer is because 3 key players in the title race. Well, who's going to be in the title race? There's 4 teams in it, so you've got to leave one of them out. Basically, if one of the 3, you've got to leave one of the teams out, let alone answer it. But I thought an interesting way to maybe summarize it. I'm just going to read you a couple of names that might be of interest in terms of just read the XG, expected goals and assists from the season. We've got Kolak top of expected goals and assists combined. He's 14.94. He's got 14 goals and assists combined according to Wyscout. I'm not going to include Jeremejeff. He's up there. But if you look down, Christensen, he'll be a key man. So I think you could certainly say Christensen will be key. For me, he's the most important Malmö player probably. In terms of just like if he was to miss some games, that weakens the team a lot. If you looked at Djurgården, I would definitely say Magnus Eriksson. He's had a fantastic season, 15 goals and assists combined. And he's got so many assists this season. He's top assist provider in the league with 11 assists. So I don't think you can ignore him. So I'd probably name him if I was naming a Djurgården player. And then you sort of got to flip a coin between AIK and Elfsborg in that case, if we're looking at the running. For me, I would say probably give a shout out to Seb Larsson. I think he's had a big impact again, as usual, the 36-year-old, just because he has that captain influence. And then if you were sort of if you're just looking on pure stats alone, trying to find an Elfsborg player, well, I'm going down the list here, XG, and it's just that they're more of a combined unit, really. They don't have, you've got Kouakou, who's up there, top 4, by the way. At Sirius, had a fantastic season. He has 12.34 XG assists combined. You've got the likes of Salmani as well, who's up there for Hammarby. But there's not really an Elfsborg player in this top 20, according to Wirescout. So they're more of a unit. So I guess if I was summarizing it, I would say Christensen at Malmo. I would say Magnus Eriksson at Djurgården, and then I would say Seb Larsson. I think those 3 players will be very influential on their 3 respective teams and how they do.
Brilliant. What a great way to round off the episode, Jonathan. So, that is it for this particular edition. Don't forget, follow us on Twitter if you're not already, at Nordic Footpod. And while you're at it, you can follow me at Meatman Soccer, and Jonathan, if you fancy it as well, at JF Football. But yes, thank you very much for listening. Appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed the show, and we'll be back again very soon.
Thank you very much. It was good listening. Good joining you again, Steve. See you soon, and we'll be back for more Nordic coverage as and when. So thanks a lot for listening. You can follow me at JF Football, FUTBOL, and that's it from me. Peace out.
Take care, everyone. Stay safe. Goodbye.